with the scholarship, it keeps Gunnar alive. It keeps him alive with me, clearly. But it also, I think that today's world, everything is hard. High school is hard. College is hard. Just living is hard. And if somebody decides to go out and read about Gunnar's story, it's a sad story. There's no doubt it's a sad story. But it's a good story, right? Because that's why we're here and that's why we're talking. Teachers and the assistant principal, that quite honestly, had it not been for them in Dodgeville, I don't know if he would have graduated. They kind of pushed him. They also gave him information about Southwest Tech, which is kind of why he decided to go there and what kind of directed his path at that point to go ahead and graduate early, get out of high school in January and start college. It was close to home. He could still live at home. He could drive. He didn't have to live on campus like if he had gone to a four-year college. He picked welding kind of because welding is kind of in my family. Almost every adult male in my immediate family knows how to weld. My dad was a welder by trade. My nephew was an iron worker. And Gunnar was creative. And so he toyed with maybe going into the culinary arts and becoming maybe a cook, but the reading aspect of it kind of scared him. So he decided that he'd rather work with his hands and do welding. So welding was just kind of a logical choice. And being that Southwest Tech was close to us, it was just a good fit for him. He was very intimidated when he first got there. He and another gentleman, a young boy from Dodgeville High School, were the only two, for lack of a better term, young, kids. Everybody else was older, either they were starting a new path or, maybe they had lost their job or whatever, but they were in that middle-aged kind of range. And Gunnar was afraid that they would think that he wasn't very smart. And they didn't kind of allow him to shrink into the corner. And so when they started to kind of pull him out of his shell a little bit, it got better. But at first he would come home and he'd be like, "Mom, they're so old." They're so much older than me, and they all have life experiences that I don't have and things of that nature. But they all knew that he was shy. It's very obvious if you had met Gunnar, you would know that he's not a talker. He would smile a lot, but he wouldn't say too much of anything. And being that they were older adults, they just kind of, "Come on, Gunnar, you're going to do this," kind of thing. And they kind of took him under their wing and halfway through the class, he would, come May after he graduated from high school and he was still going. There was a break in the summertime. And then when he came back, then everybody's starting to talk about graduation and things like that. And so there was a couple of stories that he would come home and tell me about as far as some of the things that the other students would do for him. And he got to a point where he was much more comfortable with them. But he was happy to graduate. He was anxious to graduate. He still didn't know if welding was going to be his thing. So we really talked about, do welding for a year, earn some money. You can make good money in welding. He clearly knew that that was the case. My nephew came up and talked to him about, what he did as an iron worker. And I said, you can weld during the day and give it a year. If you don't like it after a year, then you can always go back to school. You've got enough money saved or whatever. You can always go and do night school and pick something else. He had 2 job interviews prior to graduation. In the month of November, actually, he had 2 different companies that reached out to him, and he had 2 different job interviews, one in Monroe and one in Sauk City, I think. And then he had 1 job offer that they obviously couldn't hire him until after he had graduated. So he was toying with that particular offer. And again, he figured, I've got the degree, I might as well try it and see how it goes and then decide if that was the path he wanted to continue on. But that evening, then they had a potluck at Southwest Tech, the welding team did. He took us down, he showed us his booth, he showed us a couple of things that where he had welded and things that they had made and what have you. And then, we walked out, he got in his car, he put his cap and his gown and his welding box in the trunk of his car, and we watched him drive away. And that was the last time I saw him. I just wanted people to understand and know that, that there are people out there that are willing to help. I had help when I went to college. I'm assuming that a good majority of people who have gone to college have had somebody that gave them a little help. I felt like even if I gave a very small component of financial help to somebody at Southwest Tech, it would help them have less stress. Maybe it's a car payment or gas in their car, and a little less stress for them to graduate and go out and do what they need to do and make their impact on the world. Gunnar came home and sat in that little blue chair there and said, Mom, you need to come outside. I've got something to show you. And I was like, okay. And it's dark out because he went to school from, 4 to 9:30 or whatever. And so I get outside and he's got this, looks like a trough, this metal trough that he had welded. And he says, I passed, but I shouldn't have. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he says, well, it was supposed to be watertight. And it's definitely not watertight. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, well, I'm going to put up, and he said, you can have it. And I said, well, I'm going to put flowers in it. And he said, well, that's what I told him. It doesn't need to be watertight because she's just going to put flowers in it. And he said, and when Ed, the instructor, was like, well, Gunnar, and he said, all of the people, all of his classmates came around and they were like, oh, come on, Ed, you got to give it to him. Like he made it for his mom and it's going to be, whatever. So I'm pretty sure that he passed simply from his charisma and his story about his mom, because it probably should not have passed. He probably should have failed that weld. Who knows? Gunnar being the new kid and living at home. Well, my mom would do this, or my mom said this, and he must have said that a lot during his time at Southwest Tech, and so on that Wednesday he gets a notice that his cap and gown's in. I said, hey, don't forget, go get your cap and gown. He goes, he gets it, he puts it in his car, he goes to class, and Ed's planning to hand out cap and gowns. And he's like, Gunnar, I don't have your cap and gown. He says, yeah, I know. My mom told me to go get it. And he says, and everybody starts laughing and they're all haha. And he's like, what? Oh, we all took a bet that your mom was going to tell you to go get your cap and gown, which, but yeah. And then that was, again, he used to come home and tell little funny stories. And so that was the last of his funny stories before he passed away.